Hello. I've been asked about some of the techniques that I use when I do my own paintings. It's a bit tricky because I think I probably use different techniques virtually every time. I'm going to just show you some of the things I did in this painting here. So what I did, I go along, so this is a scene from just outside my village, really about 200 or 300 yards from where I live, so I'm very lucky. Little footbridge here over a very meadowy river. And I will sit and I will do some drawing. So these are drawings that are not for any drawing's sake, just for information really. So I'm just drawing the blocks of the trees and trying to find a bit of the light and dark. This little drawing here is actually the one that this one comes from. So what I will do, I will really look hard at the blocks of shapes and then what colours they are compared to one another. So this was a large willowy type tree, I think, which had a kind of turquoisey lighter colour than the trees around it. The ones behind were, well, there was one that was a bit lighter, had that sort of appley green, and then some slightly darker green. So I'm really looking to see the contrast in the colours and trying to get those colours as accurate as I can. Then behind there were some trees with some, you could see the light behind them. Then the very buttercuppy meadows sort of towards where I was sitting, so which was really lovely. What I often do then is I took the big bits of paper with me. So this is a really nice, I think it's at least a 300 gram watercolour paper. I will actually draw the shapes out whilst I'm sat outside. So I've drawn the shapes and then I'll take that home in order to paint it. Sometimes I'll start the actual painting there and then. Often I'll just start doing the drawing. I don't really like drawing from photographs. I think you lose something in that process. You lose a bit of the freshness. If you've started the whole thing off actually sitting in front of the scene, you get something better. What you get here is a lot of this dark stuff is about pooling. So where the ink, and ink is a lot of what I use, it often, because the paper is never exactly flat, it kind of runs like rivers into one or two areas, and I use that to my advantage. So I wanted that dark area there behind this willowy tree and behind the little bridge to make it stand out. So I did a lot of kind of letting the darker colours run down. Okay, I'll show you a bit more of that in a minute. Okay, I'm going to do some small examples because it's probably too difficult to do anything too big. So what I would tend to do, I'll get a pencil. Say I've got a very simple outline. I've got my tree here, possibly, and another tree behind. Okay, so very simple outline of tree and another tree. All right, I might put some sky in first. Let me just talk through materials I use. I use Brusho ink a lot. So this is a big bottle of Brusho ink. What I use, I've got this little box here of Brusho inks, and the Brusho inks come out in little tubs, and in there is a very strong pigment powder which you then mix with a load of water, and that comes out as your ink. I then pour those inks into little jars to use. I also use a whole load of other things. So I've got acrylics that I mix with. I actually don't have a very good yellow in the Brusho ink, so I often use this acrylic yellow to sort of beef that up a bit. I also use some, where's my watercolours? I use some of these watercolours, but I also, where's the tubes gone? I also use tubed watercolours as well. I use a mishmash of lots of different things and something different in every one, really. Okay, I've got a little bit of blue squeezed out tube watercolour in there. And I'm firstly going to just give myself a little bit of sky. So just in the back there, just very wet, slap it on like that. Okay, I might do a couple of those. I often work on a few at a time because this painting technique is an awful lot about waiting for things to dry. I'm going to, let's just put another tree in there. Very rough tree shape, maybe a darker blue this time. Very wet, can you see how wet that is? Okay, those are now going to be put to dry. So I've got a little radiator over here I use. Okay, and in Blue Peter style, I've got one here that I did earlier that has now dried. So, okay, now I'm going to think about maybe some different greens. I've got this one here is a leafy green and that one is a darker green. It's quite difficult to tell, but I kind of know them well now. So, and because you get a lot of ink with those Brusho inks, you can be quite kind of lavish with them. You can not worry about how much you're using. So I'm just giving that tree there nice big amount. Right. My buttercups, I'm going to use a little bit of yellow, look at that, really sort of bright yellow acrylic to go down on the surface there. Maybe a little dash up here because maybe some sun is shining through the leaves, say on up there. What I really play with is the what happens when you put different sorts of materials together. So acrylic will do something very different to inks or the Brusho inks and watercolours, and that's where you get kind of nice experimental, accidental things happening with paint. So for example, just the way this sits above that bit of yellow there I really like. It didn't mix. It just looks quite contrasting, which I really like there. So, might put a bit of the green over the top of that acrylic. Just not mixing it in, really just drifting it over the top. I'm not a blender. Okay. I'm going to leave that now. See, the tricky thing is that now this needs to dry before, if I put some more greens on there now, they will just all blend in together and it'd be really hard to get different greens together. But I have one I did earlier with this stage. Let's just put that there. Okay, somewhere around here. Yes, I've got a couple really. Here's one with no sky, those two got no sky, and then there's a couple with skies. So let's go to this one. So where it had the yellow acrylic underneath, that's just peeking through, which I quite like. It's not looking really obvious, there's just a sort of hint of yellowness. I'm going to now go into this darker green. I quite often get another little tub. This darker green I actually want to be really dark, so I'm going to put a bit of green in there. I'm going to add some blue to that, some turquoisey blue from my turquoisey blue ink. You can see and you can always try it out. Yep, that's a nice dark green. So then that I'm going to put in behind. Okay, and you can see that's going to, it's really pooling in there, looking sort of really dark just down there, so that's really great. Maybe a little bit more down there. Okay. Now, I quite like to get a bit of brown. I like the combinations of a dark brown. There's that dark brown I saw. Right, these old paints, actually, difficult to tell, but I think that one in there, those two there, not much left, are my dark browns. So round and round and round, I want to get a lot of paint on here. And I'm going to just, I think that's, it's too wet and pooly at the moment, so I'm going to put that to one side. I'm just pushing my finger down to get it to pool a little bit more where I want it to pool, which is kind of more in the middle. Oh, no, it's not going to do that. Okay. I mess around a bit with these browns again. So on this one, I've got my that appley green. There's that bit of brown. Maybe a bit of brown. Actually, it's not strong enough at the moment. Just want a few branches. Okay. That's going to need some darker green in a bit. Now this one is a different mixed green, and then I've got some little brush strokes that I also like to play around with. And sometimes I sometimes just squeeze the brush out if I want a nice big load. So can you see I've got lots of kind of cooking here, or almost the opposite to cooking, drying. Now this one I'm going to go in with that, my dark green that was mixed with a bit of blue. And yeah, that's lovely. Look at that, look at that green there. Look at the contrast of the dry and the wet. And this one's going to have its sky put in later, or maybe not at all. Sometimes I just leave it white. It's still wet there, and I might use that, especially with that brown. Just put something kind of might be quite nice happening in that little bit of what do you call it? Blurred, bleeding out. Okay, I think that's probably given you an idea. Okay, have fun if you want to have a go.